At 6:12 that Thanksgiving morning, I realized my mother was doing something she had promised herself she would never do again. She was cooking for people who barely noticed she was exhausted. The kitchen was already hot. Turkey in the oven, sweet potatoes on the counter, rolls covered with a clean towel. My mother, Linda, had been standing since before sunrise. She was 71. I watched her reach for another heavy pan and I quietly took it from her. "Mom, sit down," she smiled. "I'll sit down when everyone gets here." That was my mother. Always serving, always making sure everyone else was comfortable. And somehow, after all these years, nobody had noticed that she was tired of being treated like the family's personal employee. By noon, the house was full. My brother Ryan arrived with his wife, Melissa. Ryan walked in talking about the house before he even took off his coat. "I still think we should knock down that wall," he said. "It would make the living room much bigger." I looked at Mom. She said nothing. She never did when Ryan started making plans. But that day, I knew something he didn't. Something that was sitting inside a plain white envelope in my bag. Something that was about to change the way our family looked at that house forever. Dinner started normally. Everyone laughed. Everyone ate. Then, just as I was about to sit down, Melissa pointed toward the kitchen. "Can you clear all of this?" I looked at her. She continued, completely serious, "And don't sit until everything is finished." For a moment, nobody spoke. My mother immediately started getting up. I stopped her. "No, Mom." She looked confused. I stood up slowly. For years, I had stayed quiet to avoid family arguments. Not this time. I walked to my bag and took out the envelope. Then I placed it beside Ryan's plate. He stared at it. "What is this?" "Open it." He laughed nervously. Then he opened the envelope. His smile disappeared. He read the first page. Then the second. Suddenly his chair scraped hard against the floor. He looked at me. "You knew about this?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I had known for months, and my mother had been waiting for the right moment to tell him herself.
Ryan stared at the papers like they had suddenly become impossible to understand. Then he looked at me again. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said. "Mom did." He turned toward her. "Mom?" My mother sat quietly at the end of the table. Her hands were folded in her lap. Ryan picked up the first page again. "This says the house isn't going to my..." Nobody answered. He looked at his wife. Melissa's expression had changed completely. "But Ryan has been planning everything," she said. "We already talked about what we were going to change." My mother finally looked up. "I know." Those two words made the room silent. Ryan frowned. "You knew?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Mom took a slow breath. "Because every time you talked about the house, you talked as if it already belonged to you." Ryan leaned back. "That doesn't make sense. You're my mother." "And that is exactly why I expected you to ask what I wanted." Nobody moved. I could see Ryan getting angry. For years, he had been the loudest person in the family. When something needed to be decided, he decided it. Where Thanksgiving would happen. What repairs Mom needed. Which room should be changed. Even what Mom should do with her own money. And somehow, everyone had gotten used to it. Especially Mom. Until last winter. After a health scare, she asked me to help organize her paperwork. That was when we discovered the problem. Her old estate documents had never been properly updated after Dad died. Ryan had already been telling relatives that the house would eventually be his. He had even started discussing renovations. But Mom had never actually promised him the house. She had simply stayed quiet. And during those months of paperwork, appointments, and meetings with a lawyer, she finally made a decision. The new documents were clear. The house would remain under her control. Nobody could treat it like an inheritance while she was still alive. Ryan slowly lowered the papers. "So you knew all along?" I looked at him. I knew Mom had made a decision. "You could have told me." I shook my head. "No, It was her decision to make. Melissa suddenly glanced toward the kitchen. Then she looked at the plates still sitting on the table. I knew exactly what she was remembering. Her words from earlier. Clear the table. Don't sit until every dish is done. For the first time that day, she didn't say anything. My mother reached for my hand under the table. Her fingers were cold. Then she whispered something I had waited years to hear. I should have spoken up sooner. Ryan pushed the papers back across the table. You've been planning this behind my back. For the first time, I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because he had finally mistaken my silence for weakness. I haven't been planning anything, I said. I've been helping Mom. Ryan stared at me. That's not what it looks like. What does it look like? He didn't answer. Because there was nothing left to say. For years, I had been the person everyone called when something went wrong. If Mom needed a ride, I went. If a bill needed to be paid, I handled it. If a document needed to be found, I knew where it was. If something broke in the house, I stayed until it was fixed. But when Ryan walked into the room, everyone listened to him. He made the big announcements. He made the plans. He talked about the future. And I quietly cleaned up everything in the present. That day, I finally understood something. Being useful had made me invisible. Melissa stood up and began collecting plates. Then she stopped. She looked at me. For a second, I thought she was going to say something. Instead, she picked up another plate. My mother watched her. Then Mom looked at me. I should have stopped this years ago, she said. I squeezed her hand. You're stopping it now. Ryan shook his head. This isn't fair. Mom looked directly at him. What isn't fair? The house. Her face changed. Not angry. Just tired. Ryan, you don't get to decide what happens to my house. He looked away. You're making this bigger than it is. No, Mom said quietly. You've been making it smaller than it is. The room went completely silent. I had never heard my mother speak to him like that. Not once. Ryan stood there for several seconds. Then he grabbed his coat. Melissa followed him. At the doorway, Ryan turned back. So that's it? Mom nodded. Yes. He looked at me. You're happy now? I took a breath. No. He seemed surprised. I just want Mom to be able to make her own decisions. He didn't respond. The door closed behind them. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Mom looked toward the kitchen. The counters were covered with dirty plates. The sink was full. She smiled faintly. I suppose someone should clean all that? I looked at the mess. Then I looked at her. And for once, I didn't move. Neither did she. We simply sat there and let the dishes wait. The house felt strangely quiet after they left. No arguing. No voices. Just the sound of the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. My mother looked at the dining table. Then she looked at me. You're not going to clean those dishes? I laughed softly. No. She smiled. Good. We sat there for a while. The Thanksgiving dinner that had taken her hours to prepare was still sitting on the table. The turkey was getting cold. The candles were almost burned out. And somehow, none of that mattered anymore. My mother reached across the table and held my hand. I was afraid, she said. Of what? That Ryan would stop coming around. I looked at her. And if he does? She stayed quiet. Then she said something that surprised me. "I'll survive." I smiled. "That sounds like my mother." She laughed. A few minutes later, she stood up. "I think I'll save the leftovers." "I'll help." She shook her head. "No." I looked at her. "You don't have to help me with everything." She paused. Then she added, "And I don't have to help everyone who expects it from me." That sentence stayed with me, because I realized we had both spent years confusing love with obligation. We thought saying yes kept people close. But sometimes, saying yes only teaches people to ask for more. Before I left that night, Mom walked me to the front door. She looked tired, but lighter. "Are you coming next Thanksgiving?" she asked. I looked back at the kitchen, at the untouched dishes, at the chair where I had been expected to spend the rest of the night serving everyone. Then I looked at her. "If you want me here." She smiled. "I do." I hugged her. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about leaving. I felt peaceful. The house was still hers. Her choices were still hers. And my life was finally mine. That Thanksgiving taught me something I should have learned years earlier. Being needed is not the same as being respected. Being useful is not the same as being loved. And you don't have to exhaust yourself just to prove that you care. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is simply, "No." If this story made you think about someone in your own family, tell me in the comments. And if you believe everyone deserves to be valued, not just used, like this video and follow for more stories.